Welcome to Confident Growth, the podcast for people who are passionate about personal growth and productivity. I'm delighted today to have with us MOS Rahayu Mahzam. Welcome, Rahayu.
Thank you very much, Crystal, for having me.
You know what? I don't know if you know this. You probably don't. But you're 2 years my junior in the schools that we went to.
Oh,
yes.
really?
Yes, the secondary school and the JC. We shall not mention, but it's not ACS. Don't worry. And also you studied law, which
Yes.
I did as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so I was reading through your bio and I was like, this is very interesting.
Yes.
Because how did this person who went through this career trajectory end up being so-called accidental politician? So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I wonder myself what I got into, but it has been a very meaningful and fruitful one. I've never had any ambitions of doing politics, and I've always been a volunteer, and the work that I did also gave me the exposure and I suppose skills in dealing with people, in articulating views, in advocating for people.
You mean in law?
In law,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
So I guess those were very useful skills to have when you are a member of parliament.
Yes.
And I thought that was something that I guess fell into place as I was doing the work that I did. So I've always had that social and something, part of me that really cared about society, and the part of me that was also being able to articulate the challenges and issues people have. So I guess at some point I was noticed, I was asked.
Yes, when was that? How old were you?
I was already in practice. I was in practice for a few years. When I first was asked, I actually declined. I think that's something I
And
said
that was
before.
2011, is that?
Yes, before, yeah.
Can you
before
take
that.
us through, I think for our audience, this is so interesting. How does one get asked? Is it like a pss kind of thing, or what was it, a formal invite, or how did it happen for you at least?
I'm not sure how much I can share, but I think the leaders are often engaging with different types of constituents, with different people they meet.
Yes.
And I was always, like I say, a volunteer. So I was doing a few things.
Okay.
And I think in those sessions, I had the opportunity to meet with different political office holders, with different MPs. And I don't know if at some point I knew or realized I was being assessed. For me, it was just conversations.
So it's like more people started just saying hey, should we have a casual chat about something?
So there were just a lot of sessions and chats, and they were casual. And so I think at some point it became a bit more formal. I suppose. But yeah, I think that's really how I suppose we do it. But other than that, it's also really being able to work on the ground. I think that's important when I think we look out for people who are comfortable working with people who already have a cause and who care about growing the community and together growing with the community and helping address needs and gaps. So I think that was something I was already doing. So I guess in a way I fit some of the...
It was a good fit.
Perhaps.
Yeah, and you were headhunted, so to speak.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, but in 2011, you mentioned that you turned it down.
Yes, at that juncture. I was about to get married. Yeah, and I had other priorities, I suppose. I was always going to be doing what I was doing already then. I was already a volunteer. And I think there was also the uncertainty as to what that job entailed for me. So I didn't want to have to do too many new things, milestone things in my life at that juncture.
Yeah, and you probably didn't know about whether you were going to have kids or what was going to happen.
Yes.
So then what changed between 2011 and, when you decided to take up the reins, if it were?
It was... if I'm completely honest, it was a misunderstanding between me and my husband.
My God.
Misunderstanding in the sense that I was asked again to sort of volunteer in specific platforms, and I was asked to meet political office holder then, and I had this very short conversation with my husband and said, hey, they might ask me again, what do you think? Because he was not as comfortable the first time round as well, and that was one of the key reason why I decided against it. So when he said, oh yeah, sure, in a very casual manner, you go ahead and volunteer, I had taken it to mean that he was okay if I would venture into politics. I came to realize later that he was not as comfortable after I became a politician, but my husband's always been supportive. So I think even at that juncture when he wasn't fully 100%, he didn't want to be the one getting in the way of what he thought I wanted. It became apparent, especially when I started the work, especially when I was taken away from him and eventually our child because I got pregnant. Things just all happened at the same time for me at the start. So it was fairly overwhelming. And I could sense tension in our relationship, and I realized that I needed to really catch that because I cared for him and I could see that he was fairly unhappy, and I'm glad he did open up and say that, yeah, I'm wondering where this is going with us, and we really had a very candid conversation, and even got help to discuss our issues so that we could come to an alignment of how we would be as a couple. That was something that really helped us a lot, and I think that was also what helped me grow in this job.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I am a huge believer in getting help, whether it's coaching, whether it's therapy, whether it's counseling. I think it's so important because like we live in a modern world with a lot of new stressors. And especially with this situation of work invading so much of our realities on both sides, the both halves of a couple, it can be, sometimes like we give the best of ourselves to work, in any job. And then sometimes our partner gets to deal with like
the leftovers.
The leftovers, right? And my friends, we're predominantly, my friends are female founders or senior leaders, and we always have this conversation, and it's very timely right now at kind of the start of the year. We talk about that jar with the big rocks, and the small rocks in the sand. But a lot of times it's like if we don't actually put in the big rocks first, like the marriage is the rock, right? The kids are the rock or whatever. And then after that, all the sand and all this other stuff that will go in everywhere, then it's impossible to fit ourselves in.
It was exactly what happened to me. I didn't think through what I was making my husband go through, and it was exactly what he said. I'm left with your leftovers. Whatever time you have left. I used to have I will say I'll have family time, and then I'll mark it out in the calendar. And when something else turned up, I was so afraid to say no, especially when I was a first term MP, and I would sort of cancel it. And I said, oh, sorry, I've got to go for this one.
Right.
And there were times when he would ask me if I could do this or that. And I said, oh, could you check my calendar? And he felt so offended.
Oh, no.
And I didn't realize that I was doing that.
Yes.
And we managed to align ourselves and not play games, and not like, if there's something that's wrong, then we try and address it. And that was, I think I'm fortunate because he's that sort of a person too. Although at some point he was just retreating and I almost lost him in a way. So I'm glad I caught it, and I'm glad he was willing to work on it. And now it's really that understanding, and that big rock is very important. So if there's one tip, it is really my calendar, really putting in and respecting that. So I used to think that my job was very important because residents would expect this, or like if I don't go, what will people think? But he is important too.
Of course.
And so if I put it as an appointment, I have to honor that.
Yes.
And it wasn't good enough to put family time, I realized. I also needed to actually think about that activity that I wanted to do and then commit to it and make an appointment with him, because I can't assume that I've put family time and he's going to be free.
Yes.
So And we came to terms with the fact that yes, we have to respect each other's time, and it's still a work in progress. I tell you,
It always is, right? And do you guys have like regular review meetings?
We don't describe it in that fashion, I suppose, formally.
Or like date nights.
Yes,
or
so I
something like
do
that.
make that effort. So my son goes to therapy because he's got special needs, and
Yes.
on weekends he would go for therapy and a class. And my husband usually does that on his own. At some point, he got really, I think, stressed about it, or really upset with me because I wasn't around a lot. So I made it a point to schedule blocks of time. So I'll take the time to send my son to therapy with my husband so that we could have lunch together.
Right.
And then I would run back to events and activities when I needed to.
Yeah.
So really depending. But I told my team that, okay, you must at least give me once a month at least. But if not, I try to make it every week, and then I would just toggle from events in the morning to like then take lunch break with him and send my son. And so we do try and work those things out so that I am around for those things. He articulated that I wasn't around, and it's my son is tough to handle sometimes, and so he feels that he's solo parenting.
Yes.
And so I didn't want him to feel that way, so I really try.
It's really not easy, and I can totally relate. It can be kind of solitary thing, and that's why through the podcast, I try to, in a way, try to get people whom the public sees in a certain sense as being like, wow, they have it all. They know what they're doing. They're like, how do they do it? And show that human side of like, it's not easy, and everyone has their own story. And there's, of course, pieces that are appropriate to show on social media. But then there's also hidden sufferings that we can't talk about for various reasons. And but I think you've been very brave to share your own challenges and your own vulnerability. Again, is this something that was quite conscious of you, or you just like, I'm just an authentic person, and I feel like it's important for me to show all sides of myself?
I think the second part of me being who I am, for a long time I couldn't describe myself as a politician because I had a certain worldview or description, someone who has gotten it together, and you've got to be able to manage the show and the substantive work as well. And
Yes.
I was never good at the kind of show. I feel that I'm very imperfect, and I'm now able to say I'm proud of that. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
It took me a while because I was always conscious about what people thought about me. So I would say that there is a function of that I've always felt that it's this is just my natural self, and I'm just more comfortable that way. But it took me a while to be able to be okay with that. But I feel that it's the challenge for us, the bit that you said about it being lonely and solitary, it's just so real, especially for politicians, because, and here is where I honestly very happy to hear your views on it. I feel that we all have responsibilities, and there are expectations which are legitimate of us. And when I took on this role as a politician, I'm very conscious that it is a job I signed up for, and there are certain requirements.
Yeah.
So it needed me to be a certain way and to have a handle of things, on things. Because if I were to be unable to manage, then I don't think I would be the best fit for this job, I felt. So, and I realized this when I was having my moment leading up to campaigning, and my pregnancy didn't happen, and it was something that was traumatic. And I realized then that, I could compartmentalize and I could still do my job.
Yes.
Which gave me the confidence to say that, yes, I'm imperfect, but I can still be responsible and I will get things done.
Yeah.
So I'm often trying to calibrate that. Like, I'm often trying to make sure that people know that I can still do my job. I'm a big mess sometimes, but I can still do my job.
Yes.
After I gave birth, I was so conscious about the fact that people might now think I've lost my ability to care about them. That I think a few weeks into after I gave birth, less than a month, I went out to do market visits. So just I needed to prove a point that I can do this.
Yes.
So I don't know if it was a good and bad. So I'm still struggling to kind of find that calibration because
You gave yourself that pressure.
yes, I gave myself that pressure. I remembered when I found out, or rather when I gave birth to Aiden and I first told some of my grassroots leaders, someone told me that another grassroots leader asked him, so what happens now? And then he said, so I told him, it's going to be the same. She's still going to do her job.
Yeah.
But then that felt like, okay, I need to give that assurance to that guy that I can still do this job.
Yes.
So I kind of like really went off full force to try and prove that I have difficulties, but I will do this job because this is what I promised you.
Right.
And in my view, it's legitimate because they voted me.
Of
my
course.
residents have to depend on me for me to get things right. And I cannot disappoint them.
Yes.
Because if I cannot do this,
Yes.
then I should not take this up.
Yes.
So that's for me one principle. So firstly, I think it's identifying that it is something I can do because it's not fair to people who rely on you, I feel. I think you need to have that sense of responsibility for the work that you do. But you can be vulnerable and real.
For sure.
And that I thought was very cathartic and also it made it easy. So when I first decided on whether I want to tell people about my son, honestly, it's so odd now to speak about it, but there was a sense of shame or embarrassment. I couldn't describe, I couldn't really understand it, and I can't understand it now, but that was what I was feeling like. How do I tell people that my son's different? And I made that decision to make a speech in Parliament. It was so refreshing. I felt like, well, now everybody knows, so
It's liberating.
it's liberating. It was so
Yes.
liberating that then I realized in other aspects of my life, like actually a lot of people have different types of challenges. It may not be
Yes.
exactly the same as yours, but when you kind of tell them that, yeah, you're not perfect, it's okay, and there's always something that we can work on,
Yeah.
it makes for a bigger community, and the sense of support is there. So it really was a weight lifted off my shoulder. And
Yes, I love what you said. Coming back to your point about being able to compartmentalize, it's a very amazing skill that we have, particularly I feel as women, to be able to really compartmentalize and prioritize so that we get stuff done, and we may not be able to get everything done at the same time. But if we know which pieces are important and how to be present for that at that point of time, then everything does get done in its own timeline.
there are trade-offs.
Yes.
The time is limited. So time with my son means I'm taking some time away from, say, a constituency event or an invitation that I had to decline.
Yes.
So that is always the toughest bit to do, and I have to make that judgment to make sure that people don't get the wrong message if I
Yes.
don't attend. And so in the initial stages, I wasn't very good at that. I wasn't very clear that some things did not mean I was not good at doing my job, and that it did not mean that I was not capable of attending or to issues that mattered. So I had to quickly learn what was important, what was not, and then to prioritize.
The way I like to think about it is I'm not saying no to this. I'm actually saying yes to this.
Yes, it's about being creative.
Yes.
With the way you work, also without compromising the quality, values of service that you could deliver to the residents. So I love the way you put it. It's not saying no to something, but saying yes, and building that culture of having a balance in life.
Yeah, I want to kind of go into some more practical advice, because I feel like as a lawyer, you would have a lot of skills that you learned from dealing with difficult conversations, difficult people, managing multiple stakeholders.
I was trained in family law. I was a family lawyer.
Yeah.
And that gave me an insight to the dynamics of human behavior and how I saw myself at some point in my career as a lawyer as a solution provider.
Yeah.
Not necessarily just a lawyer. So it's about trying to go deep in understanding what is it that is bothering or causing an issue with that individual or that family, and trying
How do you do that? How do you delve right down to the root cause? Like, what kind of questions do you ask, or what kind of approach you take? Like, imagine I'm a angry, so and so that's come to meet you in one of the meet the people sort of things, and I have got a grievance and all of that, right? And I'm kind of talking in circles, and now you need to contain the situation and manage me. Like, what would your approach be?
So these are just my own sort of personal
Yes.
stages that I take, right? I think people need catharsis.
Yes.
So it is about sensing where they are at. I've come to realize after so many Meet the People session that at the end of the day, sometimes they may not want or need anything, but they need a space to vent.
Yes.
And they need someone to be the bad guy or someone to just download it on.
Yes.
And then it's about making sure that they can talk and articulate, because oftentimes you have so many people in the queue and you're trying to move things along. If it is what I assess that they need, I give them some of that time. Or if, let's say, I cannot give them the full time, I say let's meet another time, or let's have another chat over coffee at a coffee shop.
Yep.
So if it's that catharsis, I think that's one key thing. You've got to let people come and be able to do that.
Yep.
The second is then to help organize their thoughts and figure out what are the real issues. Because sometimes they come in fixated with a particular thing that they think is the solution.
Oh, yes.
But so they come to appeal, say, for this, because
Yep.
they feel that this is the sole cause of that, all other things.
Right.
And so you kind of get, why did you want this? So ask kind of those kind of questions and fully understand the circumstances. And you realize that there were 2 or 3 other things that they didn't articulate in the first instance,
Right.
that were actually the cause of the pain.
It's almost like they're your patients, and you're
Exactly.
like doing the
So
intake.
with lawyers, you've also got to ask all your
Yes.
questions, right, before you can do your affidavit and actually put out the arguments, because
Yeah.
you need to know the full picture. So that, I think, is something I try to do. But ultimately, at the end of the day, also is to treat people with respect. We always describe MPS as a place of hope. This is something I learned from SMS Lim-Lange, because when I first started out, I say, the truth is our system is pretty good, that a lot of times when people come to MPS, it's really the end of the road. Like, they have gone
Yeah.
through the appeal and there's not much sometimes that we can
Right.
do. How would you respond to that? And then she says, MPS is a place of hope. And that has been my slogan ever since. And that's what I tell to all my volunteers, because people are there because they're in pain, they're struggling, and they need something. And sometimes that something is just you walking that journey with them.
Yes. And then, of course, you have this portfolio now at the Ministry of Digital Development and Information. Yeah, so MDDI. And that sounds like a huge and very existential sort of job. What are the issues that keep you up at night when it comes to this particular portfolio?
So in MDDI, I oversee digital society.
Yes.
And that has to do with ensuring that we have an inclusive online environment and space, that people can get access to the digital services, to information that they need in the online space. They have the skills to do that and the ability to do that. Then the other aspect is to build overall capability and understanding and resilience to
Yeah.
it, and also the wellness in the online space. We live very much online in the online space, and if we don't put in the necessary infrastructure and support, we may have a society that is in a way dysfunctional or
Yeah.
broken and fragmented,
Yes.
because people are in silos now. They are
Yes.
they are circumscribed by the algorithms and what they consume, and it can be quite scary. And people may be left out. We don't want that.
Yes.
We always say we are digital first, but not digital only.
Yep.
We want people to have the skills to navigate the ever-changing world of online safety, because there's various harms that are always evolving. It's
Yeah.
kind of a whack-a-mole situation. You do with one and something else comes up.
For
So
sure.
the work is exciting and worrying, because you kind of want to do it quick. Things are just going so fast. but at the same time, you need to be thoughtful
Yep.
to find solutions that are contextualized to Singapore's needs and will help our citizens.
Yes, and it's like as a parent with 3 kids in the digital age now, I find it really fascinating. Our generation, you and me are roughly the same age, yeah. So, but like we are the only generation in the world that has known life pre-smartphones and life after smartphones. Like all the generations before us didn't know smartphones. All after us will only know like this. So I think it's a fascinating one, and something that we are all struggling with, not having the rule book. Definitely in my work, I speak to a lot of neuroscientists and psychologists and about the development of the human brain. And the brain doesn't fully myelinate, which means like lay down proteins, right? It doesn't fully myelinate until we're 25. So before 25 years old, the brain is very plastic. It is like firing, wiring, and it is actually forming in different ways. And we've never had generations of kids, that we've examined with their brain formation happen during this intensely digital age. And I think like a lot of nations, as you can see, are now trying to put in places, rules, legislation, like Australia with the Instagram thing and China about gaming. Like, what is your take on like the state's role in this?
Firstly, I think that this is an issue that requires a multi-pronged, multi-stakeholder approach. So it cannot just be the government.
Of course.
But the government needs to play a very key role in shaping, setting the guardrails, setting the whole infrastructure of legislation and regulation, and setting standards in society so that people can navigate. I think there's a role for the government to help rally and put together the stakeholders and partners who can help support residents and citizens in this journey. So how I see my work is that, that's what exactly I do kind of on a day-to-day basis. So to put it in context, for example, we recently passed the Online Safety Relief and Accountability Act, OSRA in short. And it was to cover a certain area which we felt needed a bit more support, because we do have many different types of legislation. We had POFMA, we have POHA, we had OCHA, and so it's a whole alphabet soup of different legislation.
Yes.
But we needed one that was victim-centric, that would empower victims to maybe get direct access, be able to make their claims directly against the perpetrator, and to then also lift the online anonymity. So we saw some of the trends and challenges in the online space, and we thought this was necessary to put in place. So that's an example of it. By doing so, we created also certain... we had to define what online harms were. So you kind of put in place, okay, this is what is wrong. And then you therefore set standards and markers about what is not acceptable behaviour in society. So the government has that role in that legislative front. And in the policies then we do, it has to then reflect that as well.
Right.
So we had to make sure that the support from the different agencies and all that were in place. And so we set up also the Online Safety Commission that would be able to kind of guide people. We will have to work with different partners because it's supposed to be a no wrong door approach, and so we'll have to work with counsellors, with maybe even the legal team if there was a need to guide those who need support in those front. At the same time though, you need to continue educating. So you have to have people in the community who will start to advocate and say, hey, this is not right, this is or to tell people where the resources are.
Right.
And so you kind of layer all that, and this is a whole infrastructure on just one part of this online space.
So I mean, to put it in layman's terms, like this particular piece of legislation is supposed to protect people from deep fake porn, or
revenge porn, when they use intimate image abuse.
Yes, it's shocking.
So all those things, it's meant to deal with those things. What we were seeing is that based on our annual reports that we were getting from the platforms, the time for which they say take down some
Yep.
posts or material online may not be fast enough. So we wanted to make sure that there was an avenue and there was a structure in place that
Right.
allowed for that to happen quickly,
Yes.
especially for things that could really have very significant damage
Of
to the
course.
individual. So we saw that as being an important thing, but we needed the platforms to also be on board. And so there are protocols in place for the first line of effort to be through the platform first for most of the items,
Yep.
for them to actually tell the platform, take it down.
So what does that whole process look like? Like imagine that I'm the victim of something unfortunate like this. I should first try to report it to, let's say, TikTok or Instagram and raise a report there.
So, for example, things that there were a couple of online harms that we felt very urgent that
Yes.
you can just go straight to the Online Safety Commission.
Okay.
So, like intimate image abuse or with image-based child abuse, for example.
yes.
These are serious things, and
Yes.
so you could just come straight to the.
So how do you come
they
straight?
can
It's
make a
hotline.
report. Yeah, yes. These are platforms that will be announced because it's still being put up, and by the first half of this year, there
Okay.
will be a platform for people to make that report
Okay.
and access
So
the Online
currently,
Safety
until the
Commission.
first half of this year, it's like police report.
Yes, police report, but the platforms are also have their user reporting systems that are already in place.
Okay, so like, what is the platform called?
Or you can actually report it in the system with whatever platform. So when I say platform, these are the social media platforms.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So with Facebook, Instagram,
Yes.
they would have their reporting mechanisms
Yes.
within the system.
Yeah,
You
so
can
I've
always-
done this before because, like,
You have
sometimes,
at your- yeah.
sometimes it happens to me that, and then there's this drop down thing like report an
Yes,
issue, and
that's
then
right.
there's like hate speech or like
That's right.
bullying or whatever this and that. My experience though, even when it was quite clear cut to me, a lot of times the case was resolved by the platform, like, and it was like, oh, we've
Unsatisfactory.
investigated, and it was like,
Yeah.
So
So that was exactly why we set up this law. What I think people may not fully realize is that platforms get a lot of reporting.
Yes.
And which is why sometimes the flagging, they may have missed or they may not have realized it as, some challenges that they face there. But when the government does so, it is... it's a trusted flagger in a way,
Yes.
and it's something that once we make that order, we have powers now to tell them, you have to do this. If you don't comply, there would be penalties.
this is so great because I personally have been targeted many times for fake accounts and scams. And like a lot of my friends who are public figures online also have. So there was this instance that I had 20 to 30 fake accounts that essentially was like my account name and hoovered up every single piece of content. So the profile page looks exactly like mine, but it was like Crystal Lim-Lange with an asterisk or underscore or something, right? And then these accounts were like contacting other people and saying that,
Scamming them.
invest in Bitcoin or I have an investment idea for you. So there were like nearly 30 accounts, and and when I reported them to this particular social media platform, it was just ignored. And I kept on reporting and nothing was done. So finally I had to take matters in my own hands. I actually went to LinkedIn and I went to find the
Person who was-
global head of trust and safety for that particular platform.
Yeah.
This is like a Western guy somewhere, whatever. I wrote this thing and put all the various screenshots of the 23 accounts or whatever it
You
was.
got attention.
Yeah, to get attention. And I wrote public posts. You know what? Within 2 hours, that guy responded and he said, like, we're working on it and I'm going to get you verified and we're going to take this off. Like, and it happened. But then my other friends who were, who had seen this thing unfurl, they were like, oh, you are so lucky lah because you managed to do this on LinkedIn and that's why, this person set up and took notice. But for all of us, we didn't get the same result and it's so unfair. So I was thinking to myself as well, like a lot of times when these things happen, we don't know who to call. We don't have a trusted face. And whatever it is Singapore government, we have that trust. Like if you report something to the police, it's going to be followed up on for sure. The person is going to get your case number, you're going to get a face to talk to, you're going to have multiple calls from this person. So I feel extremely happy about this development because I think it's so needed, especially in a world where this scams and like, you know, all these deep fakes and all this are really going to be on the rise in the next few years.
We're very conscious that this is the gap at the moment and therefore the need for the legislation. But we're also very conscious that we don't know yet the size of how much of this would happen and would come to OSC, which is why we're starting only with the 5 harms first. Or 5 online harms, because we want to calibrate the manpower and
What are the 5?
So the 5 would include online harassment, online stalking, doxing, intimate image abuse, and image-based child abuse. So because these are the more common ones that we're seeing, and they're the more serious ones as well. So we will start off with that, and hopefully when the agency stands up, we'll be able to deal with many of the others.
Right. Yes.
There's so much we can do with legislation, and we want to put that in place. But constantly, we've got to also look out and make sure that the crime doesn't happen in the first place, you know, and prepare our young ones to be safe. And it's getting a lot harder. So you mentioned earlier as parents, right? That's digital parenting is a whole other kettle of fish. So that's also another dimension of the work that I've been working on. It's interesting because even when you're talking about digital parenting, parenting children at different age groups is also a different thing. In my MOH work, one of the things that we've also looked at is screen time guidelines for those who are of younger age. You really don't want them to get on to this addiction too early, right? And you have the screen time guidelines because you know that their brain's being formed and you really don't want it to be impacted by this. So that's one level. Then you will have the toxic behavior or online behavior that's undesirable, like cyberbullying, and you know the cancel culture and campaign that people do online. And things that affect the mental health of our youth. So there's a whole other basket of work
like
there.
Compassion culture.
Exactly.
You know?
And so you have parents who are of teenagers who struggle and are like wondering, what can I do? So you kind of need to segmentize the work and also think up of solutions. So part of the work that we're doing at MDDI is to come up with various resources. We have had things like the positive use guideline for technology and social media out there. We've had parenting toolkits, but you know, some of these things are just so hard to translate. Because who sits down with their child, you know, and have that, you know, dialogue? Who has time, maybe, you know, in such busyness to read through? So we are coming up with programming in the community, working with partners, working with the community grassroots leaders and all that to come up with programs that can make it practical. So these digital parenting workshops or tools that can then be translated into actual day-to-day efforts with your children. Hopefully that will edify parents a bit more and make them feel a bit more empowered and in control, because our children are digital natives and we are trying to catch up with all the different platforms that they're so used to. We have our own limitations and challenges, but we do have resources and people who are keen to see this change for our young generation. So recently, MOE also reinforced their no handphone rule in schools, right? And I think those kind of efforts help to shift mindsets and behaviors. The education system is often the first to kind of be critiqued when we want to kind of change or make sure that things are different. Over the years, we've had efforts been made to diversify and within that structure to allow for kids to blossom at different stages for different strengths. May not be so apparent immediately, but actually schools are shifting. And it has been for a few years. I've realized as I'm I hear as people are making some of the comments they make about education system that they have gone through, it's actually very different from the education that our children are now receiving. We have changed things like, you know, not having exams so early on in their primary school years to actually allowing for them to dabble in coding, in, you know, other things that they may be interested in, and to diversify that pathway when they are later in their later years, right, in teens. So it's work in progress. We continue to do so. At the same time, there is also pressure to make sure that we are readying our children for the challenging economy and future.
Yes.
Because we're such a small country, which cannot just survive on our own. We've got to be ready for the world. And so how do you find that balance?
Yes.
So it's a reality that we deal with in Singapore. And we must make sure that they are taught enough, prepared enough skills, but at the same time give them that freedom and liberty to be able to grow and thrive. That has been always work in progress. And I know that it's a constant challenge, and there's always room for improvement. But I'm glad that I think the direction is right, the trajectory is right, and I suppose I would say this is the akan datang space which we should keep a lookout for.
Yes.
And hopefully together with the community, parents having the right mindset also, we are able to then create that ecosystem where we're supportive of one another and are nudging towards the right behaviors. But we do in the meantime need to appreciate that life is different here, and we do need to help support those who may have found themselves in circumstances where their children are now addicted.
Yeah.
And I feel you and I also, I mean, in general, adults are also still trying to deal with it. I mean, I doom scroll quite a bit sometimes, and I have to catch myself and say, okay, what is a better use of my life? I should sleep.
Self-parenting.
Yes. So these are things that I still need to do too.
Yes. I wonder if you have like practical heuristics, like rules of thumb, like parents should know about. I mean, for example, my husband, whom you met, is a clinical psychologist, and he always says research suggests that if you have 2 or more family dinners a week with your children, the risk of them getting addicted or having like harmful behaviors drops some like 80% or so. Yeah, so that's always one thing that's on my mind. Is like, if my kids are, with me, do I have 2 family dinners with them? Do I have, or that? But like, are there any sort of rules that we need to know that MDDI or yourself, you found useful? Like, for instance, no social media until 2 hours a day, or like whatever it is.
So we do have that. We have the screen time guidelines, but maybe just to quip with, we've been doing this Gusto study, growing up towards a healthy outcome. And that's a longitudinal study, and it's been very informative.
Great.
And they've been tracking the children since birth, and so now I think they're probably 12, and so there are a lot of learnings that we've gotten. In Singapore.
Who's doing this study?
Okay, this is where I've got to get it right. It was an NUS study. Okay. Actually, Prof. Chong Yap Sing, I'm a fan, and the work is very meaningful because there's so many spin-offs or so many data points that we've gotten out of that. One of which was the fact that actually the IQ of a child is affected by exposure to screens and digital, and so that was a finding. We saw that people are affected. So that's just, I think, a key point to note. And because of some of those things, we had put out guidelines, and the screen time guidelines is that from 0 to 18, there should be no screen time.
0 to
18 months, sorry.
Oh, 18 months.
Sorry.
I thought 18 years.
18 years. 18 months. 0 to 18 months.
Yes. Zero screen
time.
And that doesn't include TV.
Yes, yeah.
Does it include TV or
no?
not?
It shouldn't. As in, it shouldn't. You shouldn't have screen including TV. Like you really shouldn't expose your child.
Okay, I really feel I showed my kids.
I know.
Maybe Einstein.
So that's the thing. Like, I'll tell you what the screen time guidelines are, and I will be vulnerable and honest that it's something to work towards.
Yes.
Not everybody has gotten it right. Right. So 0 to 18. So no, none at all. From 18 to 6, you should limit it to 1 hour per day.
Okay.
And I think they have made exceptions for like, okay, if it's school related, then maybe don't count, but like 1 hour at most.
Okay.
Not more than 1 hour. And it cannot be during meal times or at bedtime, 1 hour before bedtime. Something like that.
And makes sense.
Because that's when they're most triggered.
Socialized,
So that's another guideline. Then onwards from 7 to 12. Sorry, 7 to. Sorry, I didn't.
6 to.
What's it? 12. Yeah, 7 to 12. So from 7 to 12, it's 2 hours per day.
Okay.
So same parameters, not during meal times and not before sleep.
Yep.
So it's data driven, And that's something that's very useful, I feel, as guidelines. But I'll be honest, as we were discussing that and all that, I really felt like I failed.
Yeah.
Because my son, like my mom lets him watch TV, and then he eats. And so he's like just blindly eating, not mindfully eating. And I would say this, that our observation is that for those parents who benefited from some of these guidelines, they were better able to kind of manage it, because some of this information came out later as a function of just the fact that we just finished the study and then whatever. And so when this information was put out, for those who managed to kind of be able to control it from the outset, it was a bit easier. And so there was awareness, and you saw sort of a new generation of parents who were a lot more conscious with it. Not everybody, but there was enough to kind of say, hey, it's a good move, right? But there were those of us who are like, what do I do now? I mean, it's stuck and it's hard when the children are addicted. So I remembered having this meeting, and my boss, the Minister of Health, was quite clear, hey, this is something that we have to be very strict about. And if you have a child, you just tell them, don't. And then I'm like, would you like to come to dinner to my house one of these days and do it with my son?
It's also very difficult with Asian parents, because like you may have certain boundaries with them, but then they may not execute on your best plans.
So I have so many squabbles with my mom.
Yeah.
Because I tell her to do this and I come home, the child's So
it's very difficult.
I think we've got to also be not judgmental
Yes.
and support some of those in those situations, which is why that idea of having this digital parenting workshop, to not shame parents, because it's tough enough being parents, and there's no
course.
guidebook, and your children are all different in this whole new digital landscape. So some of them felt that they were being shamed in a way, and that's not a positive. It's a challenge for me, my child, and my family, and it's a message that we need to continue to strengthen.
Yes.
Indeed, that's one of the other dimensions. If you look at we have the Healthy 365 app, and we encourage people to kind of track different aspects, their activity, physical activity, their diet and nutrition.
What app is this? Is it linked to like
yes, it's actually
a fitness tracker or something?
yes, it's linked to your Fitbit.
Oh, okay.
And you can, or your other devices if you have, and you can actually then track steps.
Okay.
The aunties are very savvy with this, because once you do certain things, you can get points.
Oh.
For example, if you buy healthier products, you can
Yes.
get points. I've actually used my points to pay for part of my premiums for my
Insurance?
Insurance.
Serious?
Yes, you
I
can.
haven't heard about this.
So these are some of the things. Anyway, I'm just kind of recommending this app.
Okay.
But one of the things that you want to track is sleep. And we are sensitizing people to this idea. With children in particular, it's so important. But the key thing I feel that, if you have that data and you tell people early, they may be able to sort of use that in their lives and maybe avoid getting to a certain state. But when they are in that state, then you cannot repeat that. Oh yeah, this is the screen time and you have to follow. It's hard. So that's why it must be a scaffolding of the support that you give. And so for some of these parents, even like me, the solutioning is as important, is the how.
Yeah.
It's the what are the step by step to kind of get there. And this is what we want to work on. How can we start getting our kids to kind of step away from their devices? Maybe not the total whatever immediately cold turkey, but you start by maybe the weekends, maybe put meal times,
Yes.
So
before bedtime.
exactly.
Super
So
important.
it becomes necessary to curate that at a more personal level, and really fully appreciating without parent shaming, and so that people come from a space where, okay, you get me and you're trying to help. You realize that once people get to walking, I started running because I started walking, and I realized, hey, I can take this at a stronger pace, at a faster pace, and I started running a bit. And then when I started to run, I realized, I don't waste my calories on things that are unhealthy. So then I started watching my diet. So if there is a way for us to kind of be thoughtful and reaching out to the demographics and understanding where they are at, and then hopefully bring them to where we want them to be in a very dignified and safe manner. We are hoping that can shift the tide, and hopefully for the newer generation, with the information we have, we can create a conducive ecosystem to raise children well.
Yeah, I feel like it's also at a deeper level, it's an identity thing. We have to create an identity of like an aspirational identity of like, I'm the kind of person who does this. So Professor Lim-Lange was a very famous professor who talked about the identity belief being so important for habits to change, right? So she did this study with hotel chambermaids where half of them were told that, you know, what you're doing, changing the sheets and do all that is actually exercise, and you are exercisers. You are doing a very active lifestyle, and you all are, you know, and they were given all this kind of information about how much, you know, they were burning, all that. And then there was another group B, which were not told that they were exercisers. They were just, and both groups were monitored with the trackers and everything. And after that, after a few months, what they discovered was the group who had the identity of exercisers, they actually lost a lot of fat, gained a lot of muscle. They had huge health improvements compared to group B, but both of these groups did the same activities. At first, the psychology world was like, hey, is it some kind of weird placebo effect where just the power of belief in itself will magically vaporize fat and whatever? But what they found out subsequently was quite interesting. When people are told or believe that they have a certain identity, like I am an exerciser, what they found is that group A actually started making a whole host of other micro decisions that fit in with that identity. So like they would get back home and it's like, oh, instead of taking the lift, I'm going to take the stairs because I'm an exerciser. Or instead of having the char kway teow, I'm going to have the healthy option or whatever equivalent because I am a healthy person. So I think, you know, her research was absolutely seminal because it shows that, you know, it starts with an identity of who am I? And who is my tribe? And what do people like me do things like this? So if it comes back to community again, it's identity, individual identity, and community identity. If I go to Sydney, for example, right, where I lived for a period of time in Sydney, everybody individually goes to the gym. Everyone looks great. Everyone does yoga, but that is also part of their tribe identity. It's like if you live in Bondi Beach, you drink coffee and you go to yoga and you do all these healthy things and you're very...
You surf or something.
You know, you surf and all of that because that is the identity.
Culture and
yeah. So in a way, I also feel that as Singaporeans, we are in this process of redefining our identity. Like, who are we as Singaporeans? Like, we are not like... It's a little bit hard at this point of time, and sometimes I feel like we can only see things a little bit like on a negative slant. The cliches like Singaporeans are kiasu, or Singaporeans are like, you know, magatot, or we study really hard or whatever. But what is the positive identity of a Singaporean? What do we actually value? You know, and I feel like that is also a bigger collective conversation that I hope with like the new wave of leadership like yourself who see what's going on the ground, that we can actually have a more nuanced national conversation about like what we really stand for as values, and have more civic discourse and have more people engaging with it, rather than having the more paternalistic approach where it's like, okay, we're just here as citizens and then whatever the government tells us, then we'll do sort of thing.
Thank you for raising that, and it really aligns with what I also want to achieve in my work for Singaporeans. Really having the Singapore way of doing things. Maybe because I've had the opportunity to say go for overseas trips with PM or with other leaders, and also interact with people on policies, right? We are constantly kind of comparing and looking at what other people are doing. People are looking at us. And then you realize that actually internationally, we have a certain branding.
Yes.
And there is a certain pride that we should take with how people perceive Singaporeans.
What do you think is our Singaporean branding?
Well, without being too... we are always humble. I think we have to accept that we're a small nation with very limited resources.
Yes.
But because of that, right, people see us as being very enterprising, very thoughtful in the way we do things.
Yes, I was going to say thoughtful, yes.
And effective, because we are substantive.
Yep.
We are not performative with our policies. We don't just say we're going to do it. Yeah, and then we will do it properly, and we are accountable, we are trustworthy, and these are values that have put us in good state at a more sort of international and business level, I suppose. So because of that, it has opened doors to some of our investments overseas or our people going abroad because people trust, oh, it's a Singaporean? Okay, good work. And they copy from us. They copy things.
Of
And
course.
say in the digital legislation, that we actually don't always want to be the first because we also want to learn. We know that some of these things are very nascent. And we look at other places and we learn and we quickly adjust it to our context. When people look at us, I've heard comments of that, you guys get it out. We talk about this, but implementing it's tough because sometimes there's stalemates at legislative levels, but we can effectively roll it out and we can actually see impact. We measure our impact and we get things done.
It sounds very corporate, like Singapore
It's very
Inc.
corporate, it's very
Singapore Inc. sort of thing.
But I'm also trying to draw from that. And how do we then take that pride and translate it to other aspects of our life, including creating that culture and ecosystem that is conducive for us to raise children who are wholesome, who care about one another, who care about themselves and take care of themselves, who are healthy. So I think we have to think about it. Like you say, it's a conversation that's ongoing and we should dig deeper because it requires parents and the community to participate. It cannot be that the government sets the policies with a certain vision without parents also, walking that journey with us because they need to want that too, and it cannot be about just gaming that system so that their kid does better than the other kid. Because we have to have that mindset that we have to have this good for everyone so that we can all thrive, right? But it's easier said than done. But I do see, I think, hope in the way we are translating some of our policies in certain ways. We have evolved. You said earlier that it would be at some point, I suppose, in a time where we really needed things to just get going. It may appear that Singapore is a little bit more paternalistic, right? I do this, you just go through with it. But that no longer is the case. And it's impossible to do that because the leaders will not be able to move if they just dictate what is done. We need to be, a bit more consultative. We need to have discussions. We need to account for why we made certain decisions. Whether people agree or not, that's a judgment call, we have to make that judgment call of what we think is the best decision. But we have to account for why we made that decision. And so no longer is a time where we have citizens who just accept it that the government will decide what's best. People question, and that makes us better. So I have that vision of our community where we question, we challenge status quo, but in a respectful, constructive and meaningful manner. And I see that being a way for us to move forward. Because I know it seems very broad and a little bit like lofty, right? But the reality is then, how do we translate it to our day-to-day living? So with education policies, for example, maybe this is a little bit controversial, but do we need to tuition everything? Do we need, we do know that children need support, but does it mean that your child has to be better than everyone?
It's the arms race. It's like everyone is like, we're going to put it down if you put it down. If
Correct,
everyone puts
exactly.
it down.
So if we all don't blink because we don't want the others to blink, then it'll be very hard for the government. Whatever policy we put in, it will be perverse.
Yes, and it's a $1 trillion industry, so it's not easy. It's like, okay, we ban tuition.
Correct. So I don't know if that's also necessarily the best because some people do need that support, right?
Of course.
So how do we figure out that conversation on very difficult issues that can be meaningful? And on, say, the internet, online space, right? Many other places, people have just been fragmented because of their algorithms. People are just now in their own silos.
They're so polarized in the echo chamber. Yeah, I see it, especially in America, what happened recently and all of that. And then you just see the comment section and it's like so polarized and I get scared. I'm like, okay, this can never be, I hope will never be Singapore.
Exactly. And so we need to make that effort to make sure that it does not translate here. And how do we do that? We start with creating certain guidelines as to what we say can or cannot be done. We don't want a cancel culture. We don't think that's healthy, right? So we put safeguards like there's no doxing, there's no stalking, there's no harassment, there's no incitement of enmity. So we've got to be careful. We are very particular about protecting our race and religious context. So we're very sensitive. while we believe in freedom of speech, it has to be in the context of respecting people in your space. You need to make that space clean so that you can have freedom of speech.
Yeah.
We put in laws in place to set guidelines, and then we need to have conversations. And one of the work that I hope that we can continue doing is having that kinder internet. I mean, I've had tertiary students come together and say, okay, how do we do this? They've actually broken it down to like strategies and skills of conversations.
Yeah.
How do we actually, look at, if there's a certain issue, how do you respond to it so that you are kind
with
and
empathy.
thoughtful with empathy. I'm now going through this audiobook called Calling In. It's from Loretta Ross, in American context, but some values there that maybe we could think about. Like if we disagree with something, what is a meaningful way to tell people, okay, this is not right, without necessarily just blowing it up and distancing ourselves from the people we want to rally.
That's true.
So I think there are deeper conversations, like you say, that has to be had. I think we're in the right trajectory. And while at some point in my work, I wonder if I'm so detached from the young generation, I'm now very, very proud of them because they've made us challenge status quo with the climate issues, with mental health, for example.
Absolutely.
With toxic behavior and bullying in office. They've said, why must you do this? That's not right. And I love that. And I think they can bring that same energy and thought to the internet.
Yeah.
And that's an example of how we can do things the Singapore way. We look at what perverse things can happen in other places. We protect it for our space. We choose certain decisions, some tough policy decisions, but we choose those decisions because we want to protect that space.
Yeah.
And then we allow for people to challenge
Yes.
and to give ideas and grow.
Yes.
It really is very lofty, but I think we can break it down to different
Yes.
areas and aspects of the work that we do.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation, Rahayu. I really enjoyed every moment of this. I felt that there were so many highlights for me and personal takeaways that I learned from your conversation, especially about parenting. So we are going to pop all the information in the show notes about where you can find Minister of State Rahayu Mahzam and her work and all those resources that you mentioned about, and the guidelines and the parenting handbook I'm also super, super interested in. But thank you so much for joining us today on Comfort and Growth. It's been a true pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much, Crystal. I could go on, but we are circumscribed by time. But really, thank you for this opportunity to share my views.
Such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time at Comfort and Growth. Bye.